a unifying theme within my work that I use cosmology a lot, because like 5% of our bodies are made up of stardust, and so we're actually on a like maybe 3 billion year timeline, right? If the things that make up our very bodies are the building blocks of space, right? Like when we look up at the night sky and we see stars, we're looking at ancient versions of ourselves. So thinking about actually how large we are instead of actually how small we are. I grew up in the Bronx, and so I was thinking about alternative archives that exist, and thinking about the things that people will share with like a perfect stranger or with no one at all, right? And what kinds of stories that we can share with one another, like our neighbors. And so it's situated inside of this capsule, and thinking about actually how ancient we are, especially here in the United States. I think once your family comes here and people are here for 3, 4 generations more, and then you've been here so long, you've been mixed with so many other kinds of people and cultures, right, that you have no idea. Maybe you know your grandmother's name, maybe you know your great grandmother's name, but you don't really know more than beyond that. And so the reason that it's situated inside of a pyramid is thinking about actually how ancient we are. So this show, it does have 2 main components, and the area that we're sitting in or standing in right now is the entryway, and there's a pyramid here to my right. Yeah. But inside the pyramid, and it's a step pyramid, and it's based on the pyramid of Dozier, which is one of the oldest step pyramids that exist, I think, on Earth. I think it's about 5,000 years old. And in the center of it is a space capsule, which I called lunar capsule. And so there's a voice-activated recorder inside of the capsule, and so visitors of the exhibition can go in, sit in. There's a couple of question prompts, but you're welcome to leave whatever information you'd like, and it's part of an archive. That's why it's in the space capsule, that's why it's here in this pyramid, and there's some televisions behind me, which are archival footage from different moments within Bronx history in the last 50 to 60 years, and I collaborated with a filmmaker named Paul Lieber, who actually went around to specific sites and made current recordings of certain neighborhoods. So there is a recording, one of the recordings that's on the monitors, which is the area that Jonas Bronx, who was Dutch and the first person who lived on these territories as a European, Bronx, that's why it's called the Bronx. He lived maybe 30 blocks south of here, was the farm that he set up. Paul took a ride in that neighborhood, which is Mont Haven, which is still part of the neighborhood that we're part of here at the Bronx Museum, to like almost time travel, like to look and see what the landscape looks like now versus what it would have looked like when he settled there. Encapsulate a larger timeline of Bronx specific history. Know what the Bronx means in popular imagination or current like American culture, like when you say that, what you think of. But me growing up, it was definitely considered like a violent place, a place that you don't go to, a place that is crime ridden. It is also the birthplace of hip hop. Like hip hop was invented here 50 years ago, right? Graffiti also was invented here. And so it was growing up in this moment of intense creativity, right? Like there was the fact that hip hop exists actually as popular culture, but it's a genuine art movement, almost like Dada or something, and then and that's also part of the thing that shaped me and shaped my relationship to art. So that's here in this area, and then in the next adjoining gallery is 13 years of work. It's my first survey show. So some of the works that I made, the earliest work is right before grad school and in grad school. So 2009, the first image that you see when you go into the galleries is a picture of like a cosmic portrait of cigarette butts, right? And I lived with my grandmother for about 5 years, and I was really inspired by her life. I was just inspired by her approach to material. I call her the unofficial archivist of 49 West 225th Street, which is a housing project that my family lived in for 50 years here in this borough, which is northwest of here. And It ends up being a portrait of her because she breathed through each and every single one of those filters, right? And so it's the record of her existence. And I made that portrait while she was still living, and she died in 2011. But a lot of those works in that specific area is thinking through art historical moments and making using my family as kind of the foil, right, as the center point, and how I'm exploring like a moment within art histories. It's actually a chair my dad used to listen to music and get high in when he was a teenager, and then I cast his face now and put it into the chair. This is a collage of my grandmother when she was a kid on these floor tiles. It's called Archive Wakes. I made it last year. And I had made these secret recordings of my grandmother actually in 2007. She never knew about them. But that's also part of the film that is on the television. And so it ends up being like a collection of works that I made about my family or about my grandmother explicitly. It's called New York at Dawn, and it has a cast of my face on it. There's a wall of tiles, floor tiles it's called Bronx Floors. And Gordon Matta Clark made a piece called Bronx Floor in the 1970s. So Gordon Matta Clark and Richard Serra and other artists came to the Bronx in the 70s because it was really blighted. So the whole South Bronx pretty much there was a lot of vacant properties and burnt down buildings. It looked like an area that had been bombed out by war. And so like Jimmy Carter actually walked through the South Bronx. Ronald Reagan, when he was running for president, walked through the South Bronx. So it became like an international symbol for urban blight, massive white flight, influx of black and brown people, and then like the fires. And the creation of hip hop also happened within all of that. So it was an artistic movement that was also birthed out of like economic depravity and injustice. But I also think about art like as an object or image, or it's already a time capsule, and it's already like it's all of this information that was embedded within it that in the moment in which it was created, and then it speaks to older histories, right, to like whatever discipline it happens to be in, right, like then it's by default in conversation with other artworks, right. But thinking about like somebody made this thing in this particular time and place with these materials because they had something to say, and then it was reflected of the moment in which it was like birthed in. And so I'm always thinking about that. It's a witness to a very specific time and place. And so it's me responding to history. It's me historicizing the present and thinking about maybe my relationship to space and place in that particular moment. That is also like my love letter to my family, right? Because of the ways in which Black history has lost to time. And so it's me through making art trying to figure out these different connections materially. And then in the other part of the exhibition, past the family work, is a series of sculptures that I'm calling Libertas, which were birthed out of the Light of Freedom project that I did for Madison Square Park 2 years ago. But thinking about like the Statue of Liberty or Lady Liberty being based on a Roman goddess, which is based on a Greek goddess, but the Romans called her Libertas. And in part of her role of existence was that she manumitted slaves in Roman society. And so she's the great like liberator, right? But there are lots of icons that are used symbolically in the mythology of American democracy. And so it's thinking through some of those forms and then me making assemblage sculptures in relationship or in conversation with some of these existing symbols. So that's what's like the latter part of the room under like the tarp area. I think also when I started thinking about cosmology as really as a compositional device, this language within astrophysics that is absolutely abstract. Fast forward to like 2008, 2009, I started thinking about black holes. It could be a container that could hold an infinite amount of information, and so I could just use it as like a metaphor for historical erasure. Like if I'm invited to a place and I have a specific amount of time to make something, and I research the history of that location, and then I run around and look for trash or material that I could use that could speak to the history of that place, and then I call it a black hole. Has like infinite possibilities. And so I guess I think from the very beginning it has been about reclaiming lost information, building new ways of archiving, thinking about history and the names that have been lost to it, and honoring the people that have been specifically written out of it.